Now's the time to book your stay and play for March Madness at the Golden Moon Casino Sportsbook and Lounge. Bet $50 there. Play award-winning Dancing Rabbit Golf Club for $30. And you've got the Golden Moon Hotel. You've got the Sportsbook. You've got Philip M's, which is the amazing Las Vegas-style steakhouse. It's all an hour from us. Bet 50, play 30. March Madness is around the corner. Go ahead and book your stay and play. Now, we will be there a couple of times during March Madness. Jason Marshall Henderson's bringing 30 buddies for a golf March Madness trip. I'm sure they won't have a good time.
Batten down the hatches?
Good grief. They'll need security. Golf, March Madness, beverages, and 30 dudes. What could go wrong? We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We're driven by your next Ford F-150 truck, Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. We welcome in our friend, National College Football Analyst with ESPN. He is Tom Luginbill. Lugs, what's up, buddy?
Good morning. How you doing, man?
You know, I'm doing well. I went to New Orleans last weekend, and I went to a Pelicans game. One of our clients took us down. They had courtside seats, and I ate lunch on Friday at one of Emerald's restaurants. It's called Merrill, and
I've been there.
Okay, well
I was there for the Sugar Bowl. It's a great spot. In fact, he was there when we were there.
Really?
Yeah, he was sitting in the booth right next to us. Talked to us for a little while. It was me, Dave, and Dusty Dvorak, and we had an unbelievable meal. And he just happened to be sitting there the day we were in there.
He's got a great personality, doesn't he?
You know, he's just very outgoing, and I think he's really appreciative that, like, I think he came off as being very appreciative that anybody would come into his restaurant. You know, I think that's the sense that we got.
Yeah, he still values that even after all the money and fame. That's pretty darn cool if you can keep that, Luke's.
Huge football fan, too, by the way.
He is.
Yeah.
You know, I saw some quotes years ago, you know, he's one of those that never thought the Saints would ever win the Lombardi Trophy. And so he got to ride the wave of Sean and Drew and Loomis and that whole group. You know, we were at Merrill, and it was one of those fun, long Friday lunches, beverages flowing, lots of pretty people in the restaurant. And I didn't realize this, Luke's, until we walked in, that Merrill, it's named after his daughter. That's his daughter's name. So, and his Emerald's son has gone to the Culinary Institute of America in New York, and he's working for Emerald. So it's a pretty cool deal, all the way around. That's cool, man. You've been to Merrill too. I should have known that, Luke.
It's so funny, man, because, I mean, you think about it, I mean, all the just fantastic food in restaurants in New Orleans, right? And the fact that you just brought up a place that I was just at.
Yeah, we had the Korean wings, flatbread, their gumbo. Of course, Emerald's going to nail the roux. Their gumbo was amazing. Then maybe the bourbon was flowing too. So it took us into the Pelicans game. Hey, I want to talk NFL quarterbacks with you, the guys that are going in right now and that have all the buzz. I'm not as big a believer. I'm in a real show me mode with. I don't think it's a slam dunk for Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels or Drake May. In fact, like the guy that I have the most, he may not be as flashy, and he wasn't allowed to put up the numbers because of what they do, but it worked out. They obviously went undefeated and won the national title. But the guy that I think is undervalued and underrated and would have put up some mad numbers in some other offenses is J.J. McCarthy, Luke.
Yeah, and I think because of that, he's got maybe the highest upside for development. Doesn't necessarily mean he's the most ready. You know, as you remember, he shared time early on with Cade McNamara and then obviously was the starter each of the last two seasons. But for the reasons you just listed, I think there's a lot of upside for him to develop, because the one thing that gets glossed over with him is he's a really good athlete, like really, really good athlete. He can run well, he can evade, he can create second chances, really good off of play action, throwing well on the move. And I think that's such a critical component now to quarterback play, especially, well, really at any level now when you're having to keep a play alive. Because athletically defenses have just overwhelmed offensive lines now over the last 10, 15 years, that you got to have a guy that can create. And so I'm kind of with you. You know, I think you made a really interesting point where you said, I'm not convinced on any of them. And you know what? You shouldn't be. It is such a high risk, high reward proposition. And it's a further reflection of how hard it is to project at that position at any level. And when you consider at the NFL level that they miss on 50% of the first round picks that they take, I mean, that's a staggering number. And the quarterback position is so risky, and you're having to ask and confirm so many questions and so many things that are important. And if you don't get it right, I mean, you could have a real problem on your hands. And that's what's important in asking the right questions, Bo.
Sure. Well, I thought for our listeners, J.J. McCarthy started at Michigan. Caleb Williams started at Oklahoma and Southern Cal. Jaden Daniels, as y'all know here, because we got to see him play and start on Oxford. He played at LSU and Arizona State before. And I know he's got all the buzz. I still have major questions on him, too. And then Drake May at North Carolina. And he did lose Longo his last year, and I think there's something there. And I think Mac, it's time to go the house. But I don't know there either. So here's J.J. McCarthy. In big moments, in big games, Luke's, he made big plays.
Yes, he did. He did exactly what was asked of him when it was needed. And at the end of the day, he made good decisions and he was accurate. And those are the two most important traits of quarterback play. I don't care what anybody says. It's decision-making and accuracy. So you can throw it 9 times a game or you can throw it 29 times a game. The decisions and the accuracy will determine the outcome regardless of the attempts. And I think that he showed a consistent level of performance. And I think that's the other thing, too, is the level of consistency at the quarterback position. Just be consistent. I know we've heard Ryan Day say, make the routine plays routinely. And it's really true. It's overly simplified, but it's really, really true. And again, I think with the more opportunities with J.J. McCarthy to grow and develop and be asked to do more in the passing game, which he's far more capable of, that's where I think the higher ceiling is with him, because he hasn't done a ton of that yet. Doesn't mean he can't. Doesn't mean that he hasn't shown flashes, because he certainly has. But I think you could take him and you could throw him in Ole Miss's offense. You have the exact same results as Jackson Dart. I think you could throw him in Texas offense, have the exact same results with Quinn Ewers. There's no doubt in my mind about that, about J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, he's my guy. He's my guy in this draft. I love his poise. I think Harbaugh missing games put more pressure on him in the end. I think the Ohio State game, he had to make a couple of plays. Ohio State has more talent. The multiple wins in a row, a couple of the plays against Bama, that impresses me. I know the other guys are talented, but I just have a lot more faith and confidence in him than the others. So let's go to Caleb Williams. Mm-hmm. Starting quarterback at Southern Cal, he's got all the tools. He played in a weak conference.
Yep.
Lincoln is offensive minded. I just asked, it's not all on him. Here's where I go with this. This is where I go, Tom Luginbill. When I see Eli Manning and Dak Prescott and Nick Fitzgerald, I know he didn't throw it that well, but he won games, and that's what matters. And Matt Corral and guys like that win in Starkville and Oxford. That's what I take. Okay, that's how I compare everybody else, because I know how hard it is to win in the West. I don't understand why he couldn't will his team to win more, because if you're that good, you should be able to do that even if the defensive unit's not that good, Tom.
listen, I think I would put it to you this way, and this is coming from somebody who had one of his games at Oklahoma and 3 of his games at USC. And I've said this to you before. Without him, they are a 3-9 football team, maybe. And the year before, they really got lucky because remember they were plus 22 in turnover margin. Remember that in 2022? So they were horrendous on defense and plus 22 in turnover margin. It's the only reason they had the season that they had. Without him and that plus 22 turnover margin, it masked all of the other things. So I would actually look at it from a collegiate perspective, not necessarily from an NFL perspective. I think they got to the point where they got so bad on defense. And this past year, they were nowhere near that astronomical turnover margin number, and he could no longer save them. I think he took them as far as he possibly could, given the circumstances around him. Because offensively, they have personnel. I mean,
sure.
They've got wideouts. They've got a young tight end. Zachariah Branch might be the most electrifying skill player in college football, at least one of the top 2 or 3. But my concern is not so much about whether or not he elevated enough. I actually think he did, because I think that roster is so bad on defense, and without the turnover margin number, they were probably 7-5 in 2022. They would have been 3-9, maybe 4-8 this past year. Now, my bigger concern with him is, can he play within any type of offensive structure and system? When you go and you really peel back the layers on him, so much of what he does is what I call sandlot football. And I don't think that can carry over consistently in the NFL and be successful. If you have those traits to be able to do it, that's fantastic. It's something that's really, really important. But you can't have every play be utter chaos. It can't be a jailbreak all the time. You can't be evading and bopping around and jumping in and out of the pocket and all these sorts of things. And I think that's scaring people a little bit with him. And it's scaring them to the point where they're willing to have reservations and concerns despite what his physical talents are.
Okay. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. We're talking NFL draft. Caleb Williams out of Southern Cal, Jaden Daniels out of LSU, J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan, Drake May out of North Carolina. There are others, Bo Nix and several other, Penix, of course. That's a weird one. Not sure what to do with that. So with what, describe the gap for you between like Caleb Williams from Southern Cal and J.J. McCarthy from Michigan going into the draft?
Caleb, and I'm going to give him credit where credit is due. There are some things he can do with the football and with his arm angles that are ridiculous. You can't coach him. Very few guys have it. And he's got, I think, an insane amount of natural God-given arm strength. And I don't know if I necessarily would have said that coming out of high school. I felt like he had a good arm. Obviously, he was our number 1 ranked player at the position coming out. But when you see him in person and you watch some of the things that he does with his God-given ability, there isn't anybody that compares to him. That's what makes him so unique. Now, as with every player, because there are no perfect players, there are going to be people that are going to try to compare or look to compare J.J. McCarthy and Jaden Daniels and Drake May and Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and Caleb Williams from a mental perspective, from a personality perspective, from a competitive temperament, a mental toughness perspective. That's where they're going to start separating all of them, or they're going to attempt to start separating all of them. Because I'm a firm believer, I don't care whether you're 17 years old or you're 21 years old. If you fail to ask this one question in player evaluation, and it's a very simple question because it answers a lot of different questions in one, and that is, does this player love football? It is that simple. Because if you start going to the strength coach and the athletic trainer and the equipment manager and the counselor and the study hall monitor and a team physician, right, and they're all giving you the same answer, or you're getting mixed reviews with that question, right, you're going to take real special note of that, in my opinion, because they're all talented, right? They all have gifts. They're all going to have things that people would covet at the position, would be glad to have, that are winnable traits, that are potential championship level traits from a physical attribute standpoint. They all have it. But how do you separate who's going to pan out and who's not? And I'm a firm believer it's by asking that very simple question. Because if you ask, does this person love football? And then you hear that he has a poor work ethic in the weight room, the answer to does he love football is no.
Right.
If you ask, does he love football, and you find out he's the last guy in the building, the first person is out, the answer to does he love football is no.
And now, guys that play uphill more, the reason why the Blue Bloods haven't produced a lot of big-time quarterbacks is because they don't have to play uphill in college. Now, we're seeing a little bit of that change because the Blue Bloods have adopted, as you know, starting several years ago, except Harbaugh in Michigan a little bit, but they've adopted a more wide-open offense. And I think the league stays with Alabama QBs or highly guys that are number 1, 2, 3, top 5 picks a little bit longer. Jalen, Tua, Baker, they continue. Yeah. Justin Fields, we're in this debate right now on Justin Fields. Where does he go? What's he going to be?
He's done yet. I don't think he's done yet. I think if he gets in the right place, he has shown enough flashes and shown some things. At times it looks special. And there's been some times he's looked downright poor, but you could also make the argument that he's got terrible personnel around him.
No, I'm with you. The Bears have been a train wreck. So
yeah.
Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Minnesota look to be the favorites in the clubhouse. All right, let's go to Jaden Daniels. What are you concerned about as far as Jaden Daniels going into the NFL?
Oh, that's a really good question. My concerns when he left Arizona State prior to his arrival at LSU was that he had a very, very difficult time performing in the drop back passing game. Very difficult time at ASU. And I think they were trying to ask him to do things that they shouldn't have been asking him to do on offense. And that's where Mike Denbrock at LSU, I thought, really did a good job of accentuating his strengths and masking his weaknesses. His strengths were play action, get the ball out of your hand quickly, move the pocket, change the launch point, incorporate quarterback run. His weaknesses or maybe areas of improvement are just purely playing from within the pocket and being asked to do nothing but be in the 3 and 5 step drop game, full field progressions and all this and that. I just don't know if that's him. That would have been my concern leaving Arizona State going to LSU. And then I think coaching at LSU did a really nice job. As I mentioned, Mike Denbrock did a wonderful job. And listen, if you're going to have a criticism or you're going to start asking questions, remember that Mike Denbrock was the offensive coordinator for Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati. And you can make the comparison that in college, Desmond Ridder and Jaden Daniels are very similar skill set-wise, right? Yeah. So now you ask the question, did they do such a good job with their scheme and identifying traits and making sure they did everything to not put the quarterback in a position to fail, which is great coaching at the collegiate level? And then for whatever reason, like with Desmond Ridder, I don't know if he's ever going to be a guy at the next level. Could you ask yourself the same question about Jaden Daniels? It's kind of like if you go back through the years and you look at Jeff Tedford's quarterbacks, going back to Trent Dilfer, to Akili Smith, to Joey Harrington, to Aaron Rodgers, and everybody used to say, well, none of his guys pan out in the NFL. Well, his job's not to coach in the NFL. His job's to win at Cal and at Fresno State and at Oregon and wherever he was at the time. And so I do think that with Jaden Daniels, I don't know if I necessarily have worries. I think I would really make sure I would research where his level of comfort is in terms of what you're asking him to do scheme-wise.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sold on him either. I think he had incredible talent around him at LSU. And I think our league was way down this year. And I understand the defense was terrible. But, man, when you're throwing the first-round picks, I just think I don't think we put enough emphasis and talk about enough when you're throwing the first-round picks, what an advantage that is in college football.
Let's answer your question with another question. Have you noticed that every time Garrett Nussmeier plays, he plays really, really good?
Yeah.
There you go. There's the answer to your question.
Again, I go back to being on the sidelines right before Tua got knocked out of the game against Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And I thought Tua's a good player, but I thought he's like the next guy. I walked on water, and I'm on the field, and I'm watching. I'm like, these guys are running wide open. I think I could complete a couple of these passes. I mean, Devontae Smith and Waddle are running 5 and 6 yards wide open over the Mississippi State secondary. So I have to adjust what I'm thinking because in the NFL, it's like, you're throwing to the size of a watch, Luke.
Yeah, you're not going to have windows like that.
So, yeah, the windows are so small. And that's what it will come down to with these guys. And I'm going with J.J. McCarthy. Okay.
Well, if it comes down to that with all of these guys, then if you put them all in a group and you've taken every play that they've played, every single snap, every third down, every red zone possession, every single thing, who's the most accurate out of the whole group? That's the question that you have to answer.
And even though Caleb Williams you were describing Mahomes-type traits, you got to give Andy Reid and Mahomes credit for letting him play, but also harnessing it to the point where it works the overwhelming majority of the time.
No doubt. No question.
Okay. Have a good week, buddy. We'll talk soon.
All right, buddy. See you later.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds Show. We're driven by your next Ford F-150 truck. Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. Who would you go with? Who do you like the best as far as the quarterbacks going into the NFL draft? Jaden Daniels? Of course, that's going to be, I saw him play in proximity to Baton Rouge, maybe. Caleb Williams, Southern Cal. J.J. McCarthy, Michigan. Drake May, North Carolina. Bo Nix, who I think's got a chance to be a good player, out of Oregon. And Michael Penix out of Washington. There are others. We're live in the BankPlus Studio. Paul Feinbaum at 9:30.